And
What was number
I'll
two?
preface this. I'll preface this
What was
with I'm
number
a high
two,
school
sir?
teacher. Say it again, sir.
What was number two?
Number two, I think it was gun control. I
No,
think
it
owning
wasn't.
guns is very important.
No, that was the last one. I'm saying
Oh,
number two.
okay. No, two would have been the support of our police officers.
Okay. All right. I got you. All right. So
So, and
identity
I
politics.
want to
So like the
preface this
fact that
with I
Trump.
am a high school teacher, so I have a unique perspective on what it's like to
Can I
actually
respond?
see these things in. Yeah, just I just want to say that I have a unique perspective on how I see these things kind of intertwine within the culture and society of the United States of America.
Okay. Yeah. So you said identity politics, like Trump saying that Kamala Harris turned black.
No, I will say Trump says some things that are targeted towards, picking out the pieces of the puzzle of which is identity politics. Do I
Isn't that
agree with
Trump
it?
playing identity politics though?
That is him accusing Kamala Harris of,
Kamala.
that's why I said
Kamala.
Kamala, of playing a part in what is more important. Is she Indian? Is she African American?
You understand you can be Indian and black, right?
I get that. Yes, sir.
Okay, so if that's true that you can be both Indian and black, then he's playing identity politics and she hasn't even brought it up. So if you care about identity politics, you wouldn't be voting for Trump. If you cared about police
I'm
officers,
saying more so in the sense of, can I tell you a story really quick?
can I make my 2 points first?
Yeah, go ahead.
If you care about police officers, you wouldn't vote for Trump because he wants to pardon the people that pled guilty of violently assaulting police officers on January 6th.
I agree with that. Yeah, not saying that they should be pardoned. I'm saying that there is a certain cultural aspect in which we treat police officers that should be shifted. I think that there is a respect for police officers in the society of America that should be shifted.
Wait, so you
And
think it shows respect to pardon the people that pled guilty to violently assaulting the police officers?
so I'll tell you this. About 3.5 weeks ago, there was a kid at our school after a football game. It got rained out, so we all moved into the new gym. He pointed a gun and pointed at people in the gym. Okay. He ran into the bathroom. I stopped him from leaving the bathroom, and then another police officer chased him from behind. Okay. We both took care of him. We put him to the ground, got the gun. But I think that the way that the kids looked at the police officer was that he was aggressively, you know, there's just a disconnect between, probably people under the age of 30 who do not understand what it's like to be a police officer. So, I mean, that's a whole another topic besides, what we're talking about with identity politics.
So I think it would be disrespectful to police officers to say you're voting for a candidate that literally said they would pardon people that violently assaulted police officers on January 6th.
Yeah, but could you not agree that there is a certain lack on the left of respect for police officers?
Not on behalf of
Maybe
Kamala Harris.
maybe this is my own, biases of seeing the right versus the left.
Her entire career, she's worked with police. As a prosecutor, as a district attorney, as an attorney general, she's worked with police. Appreciate the coral. Thank you so much. Okay. So
Yeah, but
what you're not acknowledging is that.
Can you give me an example of the left trying to, I guess, promote in a way a certain respect and elevate a police officer to the society of America than versus the right? You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense?
I gave you an explicit example per standard.
Of how Trump
wants to pardon people.
Trump
Yes.
wants to pardon
So
the people
clearly
that
they have a
attack
better.
the police
So
officers. Yeah.
Kamala's not driving that, right? And Kamala instead, right, is supporting police. You understand that, right?
Yeah. Well,
So
look,
we can
hey,
acknowledge. We can
yes, that's one
acknowledge.
example.
Kevin, please let me finish.
And I will agree with you
Please let me
that
finish. So we can acknowledge that it is the case that we can support police, and then also say that it is the case that we need huge reform. We need reallocation of our funds right now towards things that are better suited at fighting crime, and that's what she's been advocating for. When people were saying defund the police, you're misunderstanding them. What that means is reallocate and reform. That's what defund the police means. It doesn't mean no police. It means reallocate and reform. It means right now we have a system in America of policing that does not help the American people, and people have a cultural view of the police that is bad. Instead of just blaming the people, acknowledge the things that are wrong with our system so that we can create a system where people look at police as they look at firefighters,
Well,
where
I
people
agree
look at
with.
police as
Hey, look, I
heroes,
agree with you
not
one thousand
as
percent.
people who are fighting them and trying to unalive their family members. We understand that we need to
But
acknowledge that it's a
as a
systemic
leader,
problem
as a leader, how can you promote that within the community to make it to where the
by
people of that
by
community
by building
have that
trust,
respect?
by building trust with the police in our communities. You know what builds trust? When police take accountability, when police enforce laws correctly, when police respect the population. Okay? If we have trust with the police through that, appreciate this description, thank you so much, then we can change the way that people view it in society. Appreciate the cap. You're not
Yeah.
going to just change the way people view it in society without changing the way that police operate in this country. Because this same thing doesn't exist in a bunch of other cultures around the world because they don't have the same types of problems we do. Mary, thank you for the $15 on PayPal. Thank you so much. Courtney, thank you for the $10. And Leola, thank you so much for the $50 on Cash App. Thank you so much, Leola. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
No, look, I'm not disagreeing with you that there is accountability issues. There are abuse of powers. There are, there's a whole bunch of stuff that is wrong with the community policing within our society. But I think as a leader, to try and, you know, change the narrative as a way to give police officers the respect that they deserve for all of the, you know, the stuff that they have to deal with. That,
Respect is
as,
earned, and people who are
well,
are
I
good
agree.
good officers, they get that respect because they actually deserve it. Okay.
Yeah,
Now
but when
now
you
we're
have
not
a
gonna now
kid
people aren't going
pointing
to
a
just trust
gun
all police
in
and respect all police
school,
without it being earned.
so
And
how do
as
you earn respect
and
though?
also, if you are so pro police, why vote for a criminal?
Well, look.
If you're serious
I
about
mean,
law and order in this
if that's
country,
the case that you want to, if that's the case that you want to present, then we should, have fired every other president leading up to Donald Trump. I mean,
what? Wait,
Bill Clinton.
what crime?
Bill
What
Clinton,
crime did Biden
had
commit?
sex with a teenager in the Oval Office. I
She
mean,
was over 20.
George Washington owned slaves. Thomas Jefferson owned
Yeah,
slaves.
and
Andrew
those people are
Johnson
bad. We shouldn't look
violated
up to
the
those
10-year
people.
of Office Act.
Deanne, I appreciate the $10.
And
Wait, Kevin, you
Andrew
want
Johnson in
Jackson?
1865, no,
So
Andrew Johnson he
okay, you're
got
thinking of a different one.
impeached for violating the 10-year of Office Act in 1865.
Kevin,
He wasn't
I
impeached.
don't support a lot of old presidents. George Washington is not someone I look up to. Thomas Jefferson, not someone I look up to. These people owned slaves. They owned people who were black as property. Okay?
Mhm.
I don't support that. I don't look back at that as good. You want to know who
No,
does
yeah,
and
I
fights for
agree.
that? Fights for their commemoration? Donald Trump. Donald Trump fights for their commemoration. He said there were very fine people on both sides when there was a group of people fighting to keep up a statue of Robert E. Lee, a Confederate, a traitor to this country. Chisholm, thank you so much for the $10. He wants to put people in prison for a year for burning the American flag, but doesn't want to put people in prison for flying the Confederate flag. It is way
Yeah.
more disrespectful to what veterans fought for in this country, way more disrespectful to the Constitution to fly a Confederate flag than it is to burn the Constitution, right, as protest to the federal government upholding statues of white supremacists that owned slaves and fought for the Confederacy. Now, that is a right, that's a constitutional right of this country to fight, right? Is to fight
Hmm.
for what we consider right and to tell our tyrannical government to do what's right in the face of evil. Just so I appreciate the $5. If we can't do that,
Yeah.
that's antithetical to the values of this country. What's also antithetical to the values of this country is flying a Confederate flag. And when you go to Trump rallies and you see the Confederate flag flown, right? Why don't they say that those people should go to prison for a year? Because they see
Well,
that at their own
the
rallies. They
state
see
of
the
Georgia
Confederate
basically
flags.
has the original, not the battle flag of which the bars and stars, but the state of Georgia basically has the exact Confederate flag, just with the 13 stars in the circle. So I agree that there are, components of the states, of the government, that still have, the symbolisms of
And
slavery.
it's the commemorations of slave owners.
Yeah,
We should
yeah,
not be
yeah.
commemorating slave owners in the society. I mean, even
Well,
like
I mean,
even just the thought of having slave owners as the people who are the face of our money. I know it sounds like something that you haven't thought of a lot. It's like not that big of a deal to some people. Appreciate the paper crane. Thank you so much. But I think it's bad to commemorate people that were so terrible. Okay.
yeah. And well, that's the hard thing is that I mean, they're Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson. Their faces are imprinted and carved on Stone Mountain. So I mean, there's a lot of that ingrained into to society. I see that. But can I tell you a story about a kid in one of my classes? Is that okay?
Sure. I mean, I do want to make sure that we get on topic and whatnot, but go for it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, this is going into
Appreciate the
my
paper
first point. Okay, is that have you ever seen those videos where it's like the privilege walk, where it's like if you have two parents in a household, take a step forward, right? If you grew up in a middle class family, take a step forward, right? So on and so forth. Okay.
Okay.
Well, a teacher in our high school did that, and then a young black lady, black student, she came to me after that she had done that in the class, and she walked into my classroom with tears in her eyes because she had never felt so pointed out, so targeted for the way she looked, for the way that she grew up compared to her peers. So I do believe that there is a harm and a danger in identity politics by making your identity more important than who you are as just a simple human being.
No one's doing that. Kamala Harris is not fighting for that, and Donald Trump has actively done that. He said that Kamala Harris turned black. That is injecting her identity into a conversation that she didn't do. So I don't know why it's such
And
an issue for
I
people who are
understand that he
victimized
did that,
in
and I've
certain
heard you
scenarios.
say that before in your live. But I think that there's a certain kind of it's more of a response to using identity politics more than it is him trying to stronghold her into making her feel accountable, whether she's black or Indian. I think it's the
She's both.
left. I agree.
That's
I
not
agree.
showing
I
out
agree.
her
And
being
look,
engaged
I'm
in
not
identity
disagreeing with you that
politics.
she's not.
I think that's the complete other way around. I think that you have it mistaken. Right? I think
That
he's the
the
one that's bringing it
right
up. She
uses
didn't bring it up.
identity politics.
Yes, that's what Trump was doing.
Yeah, well, I'm saying the way that he's taking that narrative was in a sense to combat the identity politics
She
that
never
the
brought it
left
up.
used.
She never brought it up. So how is it combating anything if she never brought it up?
I mean, what? So, I mean, tell me, do you agree that the left or the right, whichever one you think, uses identity politics more? Do you think it's the right that uses it more?
I actually think it's the right. I'm not joking. Like I
Because
genuinely
they're
believe that.
all.
Because instead of acknowledging the issues of our country, they do culture war problems, right, in order to be able to take away from the clear economic issues of our country. Instead of talking about things about the fact that we need universal health care or the fact that there's homelessness in this country, they specifically bring up the fact that they don't like people who are GAY pushing it on their children, which isn't happening, right? We're actually pushing being straight on children, right? Instead of talking about the fact that we have real issues in this country, like we don't have a plan for childcare on Trump's side, you want to know what they want to talk about? They want to talk about the fact that Kamala Harris is a DEI candidate, when the only reason that Trump is in the position only reason he was in presidency is because of DEI, i.e. the Senate, i.e. the Electoral College. The only reason he was in that position. But DEI, as long as it benefits people who are white, actually orange, right, in this society, rather than benefiting people who have been historically oppressed in this country, right?
Did you just say that Trump was orange?
Yes, I did.
That's funny. Look, I know. I know there is a white nationalist movement that is ingrained into the right. Right. There's no disagreeing with that. I mean, there was a story that I just saw to where I think it was Gettysburg College, where a young black man on the swimming team got the N word carved into his chest by a whole bunch of his white teammates. I don't know if you've heard that story.
That's terrible. I've not heard. I did not hear about that until
Yeah,
now.
they
No.
carved the N word into his chest
That's
and
terrible.
wrestled him down to the ground. which were his teammates, his friends, and he was the one that ended up leaving Gettysburg College. So I'm not disagreeing with you that there isn't racism, that there isn't a use of, I guess, identity politics on the right. But I do believe that the dangers of making your identity the sole factor on how we judge people based off of, the way you interpret human behavior, the way that you interpret the way people grow up, the way people
No,
live,
so no one's
right?
saying make it a main lens. People are just saying that in the context of intersectionality, sometimes you will identify that race does impact people in a negative way. Like the constructs of race in our society have negatively impacted people who are black in this country. The concepts of race in our society. So
Of
all we're doing is
course.
look using it as a lens to view how people interact in society. It's not saying you put this above everything else or like only look at identity. That's not what we're advocating for. We're just
That,
acknowledging the
that
fact that
I
these
believe that
certain
that might
things
not be you.
can cause disparities. These certain things can cause issues within communities
Yeah.
and society.
Look, hey, look. I'm not saying that it's not you that's doing that, but I would have to stand on saying that there are people on the left that do that, that make that the prime factor on how we treat people or and how we
And
interact with
there are
people.
people on the right that do that,
Yeah,
but they're coming
look,
from a racist
I know.
perspective. So it's like
I'm not disagreeing with you.
you can say this, but then like I think it's way more important to acknowledge the fact that there's still racism and that people are using
Yeah,
racism to perpetuate the culture war
yeah.
rather than talking about people who are talking about from a circumstance where they want to like benefit these circumstances,
Hmm.
right? Or they're talking from a position where they have been, right, discriminated
Yeah.
against, right? Like I think it makes more sense to hyperfixate on the racists rather than to look at the other way around. If we're gonna look at just like, oh, some people in this party do this.
Wait, you're saying that we should more emphasize the people
Yeah,
on
if
the
you care
right?
about identity politics, you should care more about the people who are racist trying to use their identity to continue their racism, right? Rather than the people who are referencing their identity in terms of situations in which they've been discriminated against.
Hmm. I mean, that's a statement that I don't really know how to interpret right now because, you know, look, racism exists. We've already established that. I think it is more dangerous, though, to make a young black girl in high school make her feel defeated and feel a way about herself
Kevin,
because
I'm
you
not
have
arguing
taken
with you.
the scope of what it means to be black in America.
Okay, yeah, I'm not saying that like we should do every single classroom should do those like privilege walks or whatever. That's not what I'm arguing, right? I think it needs to be taught in the context of history. Okay, these
Hmm.
lenses are like a sociological analysis that is relevant in the context of history. There needs to be classes on sociology, right? There needs to be classes
Yeah.
centered around how, like, particularly, race has been used as a concept in society to discriminate and oppress people. That's all in sociology and history, okay?
Yeah.
But the point is that we were referencing is that these things have been historically left out of history classes. History has been taught from the perspective of a white man. That's what history has been taught as. So what we should do is we should have history taught from a bunch of different perspectives because that's what gives us the more accurate view of history rather than looking at it from a small lens of just a white man.
Can I ask you a question though?
Yeah.
Should a, let's say 12, 13-year-old boy to 18-year-old boy feel like they cannot speak about their political views because they are more conservative, maybe not even support Trump, but more conservative? Should they feel like they don't have a voice because the teacher in the classroom makes them feel guilty of their point of view?
No, like if you just believe in like lower taxes or something, no, right? But if someone is like expressing bigoted opinions, yeah, you shouldn't feel like happy to express your bigoted opinions, right? Like I think that bigoted opinions should be stigmatized. I think those are bad. Those are corrosive towards our society to not stigmatize bigoted opinions. Like there becomes a circumstance where stigmatization can be used for good, and stigmatization can be used for good if we're talking about harmful things. Like, for
Hmm.
example, murder is stigmatized in our society. It's stigmatized to go murder someone. I think that's a good thing to stigmatize that, right?
Yeah.
But what we have a bad, sort of bad taste in our mouth in terms of stigmatization is that things that shouldn't be stigmatized are stigmatized. right? Like people
Yeah.
stigmatize being gay, or people stigmatize, right, being a woman, or like having feminine characteristics as a man, right? Expressing your emotions as a man. Those things are stigmatized, and those things should not be stigmatized.
Yeah.
Tony, thank you for the $50. Thank you so much, Tony. I really
Ooh,
appreciate it.
50
Thank you so
bucks.
much, Tony. So here, let me center the conversation. Let's
Yeah.
let's talk about like the policies. What policies do you like of Trump's that he influenced to get passed that you think benefit our society?
Look, I don't really want to get into the policies because I know Kamala Harris has, some great policies. I mean, to build, what is it, 30 or 3 million homes that are affordable to the middle class. I think that's, great. Um, the border is a big concern of mine. Um, I mean, you know, and I don't know what Trump is going to do in order to secure the southern border. I don't. I truly don't. But I believe he's, been firm on it that, and even under his administration was less than what it is now, that it will be more secure than what it is today. Um, I think that's not my number one priority is securing the southern border, but I think he will do a better job of securing the southern border than what Biden and Harris have done in this past 4 years.
So then why did he call people in Congress to not vote for the bipartisan border bill?
Well, because I think Trump is he likes to be the one in control, right? He likes to be the one to say that I did this, and so I think there's a selfishness in that,
Is that a good quality of
decision.
a leader that you want? Because they cared more about getting the attention of fixing the problem than actually fixing the problem in of itself.
No, I don't. I don't think it is. I don't
I
think
think
it
that's a
is.
huge problem, right? Because again, he cares more about running on the issue than he cares about fixing the issue.
Yeah. No, I mean you hear him every single day that he will be the one to put an end to the Ukraine-Russia war,
That's
right?
a total lie. The only way he could do that is by forcing Ukraine to give up land. That's it, which Ukraine doesn't want to do.
Yeah, I know they've lost a lot of it.
Well, they're actually stopping at this point. They're like stopping Russia and they're pushing back on Russia.
Yeah, I think I
So
just
we're
saw.
containing Russia right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, look, there are qualities of Trump that disagree with. I think he's goofy. I think he's silly. But I think at the end of the day, I believe that there are the cultural aspects that Donald Trump brings that are more sanctified in what Kamala's administration will bring. And that's bringing safety and security to America, right?
No, I
Bringing
okay.
a sense of patriotism, bringing a sense of respect to the community. And look, if he gets in and it doesn't go that way, then, well, look, that's what happened. We can't foresee what's going to happen in the next 4 years. But from a gut feeling of the cultural and societal issues that I see as a high school teacher, I believe Trump is the person to help put us on a better direction. And I'll be honest, in 4 years, I hope there is another president that will, you know, do a way better job than Trump. You know,
Okay, so here's my issue. This is I think that one of the
yeah.
worst things about Trump is the fact that it would create such a bad culture. And when I say a bad culture, I mean people who defend people who have been held civilly liable of sexually assaulting a woman. They say it didn't happen. That's grape apology. That
Mhm.
adds to grape culture in our society, perpetuates conditions in which lead to the violent assault of women, right?
Uh-huh.
It
And,
perpetuates
and if that
misogyny
was the
because
case, though,
Donald Trump is a sexist. Donald Trump,
yeah.
right, doesn't care about women. That's why he would have that's why he did violently
Why
assault
was
one,
Bill Clinton
right?
not
And he
kicked out
wants to
of office
restrict the
then?
rights of women. What's up?
Why was Bill Clinton not kicked out of office then
So
for
as it relates
cheating
to that,
on his wife?
yeah.
He
So
was
I disagree.
impeached, but he wasn't kicked out of office.
Yeah. So as
He
it relates,
lied.
that's not an impeachable offense. Cheating on your wife is not an impeachable offense. I disagree with it. I think it's a very bad thing, and I think it shows bad family values.
Hmm.
Now, that's not demonstrating of sexual abuse in the same way that we're referring to Trump, because Trump's cheated on every single one of his wives. The last one with the corn star while his wife is pregnant. That's not what I was referring to. I'm referencing the forceful penetration of a woman's vagina against her will. right? If you can violently assault a woman, well then when you're in the position of power, what's to say that you're going to have good legislation for the 170 million American women and girls in this country? And if you have a significant other, right, that's a woman, or if you have children, right, like
Mhm.
young girls, right, I would hope that you would want a society in which treats them good and make sure that it's very important to not allow people in positions of power who do not give a fuck about them, who actively perpetuate systems that harm them. Okay? And
Mhm.
misogyny actively harms women. Okay? And that's what Donald Trump perpetuates in our society. He perpetuates a society where young men feel like it's okay for them to be misogynistic to a greater extent because their president is. They feel like it's okay for them to defend,
Yeah.
or I mean, be an apologist for rape because their
Yeah.
president is. So
And
that's a
look,
bad culture.
that's what millions of, young white men in fraternities and college have to, overcome, right? That's not, of course, the leader of the country is the person that should establish the norm and establish what it means to be an American. But then it also trickles down to everybody else below him, right? The parents, the community leaders, the teachers, right? There is a community and societal issue that America is facing that is not just allowing it to happen, but perpetuating it to happen. So I
So how, how
in
do how do we overcome things? I don't think you can overcome those things, right? I think that those things are a disqualifier, right? Like we shouldn't vote for this. Kamala Harris has not been held civilly liable of forcefully penetrating a woman against her will. Kamala Harris hasn't sexualized her daughter. Kamala Harris didn't try to restrict women's rights. Kamala Harris didn't call for a complete and total shutdown of Muslims entering the country. Kamala Harris didn't do any of these things. These things were perpetuated by Donald J. Trump. And I understand wanting conservative policy, but this goes well beyond conservative policy. Appreciate that,
sure.
mustache. This goes into the very basis of how our children interact with each other, right? This goes into the very basis of how we treat each other as a society. And if we are
Mhm.
truly, right, actually wanting to get rid of things like rape culture, get rid of things like misogyny, get rid of things like racism, well, then we actively have to do that when voting for our presidents of the United States. Because it is the case that it's one or the other. You have someone who has a racist history, you have someone who doesn't. You have someone who has a misogynistic history. You have someone who doesn't. You have someone who's been held civilly liable of sexual abuse. You have someone who doesn't. You have someone who tried to coup the country. You have someone who doesn't. There's so many relevant differences between them that we can't ignore them.
Yeah. No, I mean you're right in those things, but more of it comes down to an ideology of what I
Sale,
believe
thank
the
you for the flying jets. Thank you
left
so much, Sale.
uses to get their point across versus what the right gets the point across with. And I, go back to the 4 points that I started with, right? Identity politics is dangerous, and I agree with you that the right does it too. But I think the way that the left uses it is more dangerous. It's more concerning, as opposed to
Yeah, I
the
think that's a
the,
harmful
the
view to have.
relations of the children within our communities. And I see that within the high schools, right? I see that with teenagers, right? I was a foster parent for 5 years before I became a teacher, right? I was in my own house raising 9 boys, 3 out of the 4 weeks of the month.
Hey, Kevin, I don't want. Before you get into that, I think we need to make this very clear. Emily, thank you for the
Okay.
$5. When you talk about identity politics being brought up on the right, what comes from that? We're talking about the expression of bigotry, okay? The
Uh
oppression
huh.
of people. Whereas if it's coming from the left, we're talking about acknowledging the people who were victimized in our society or oppressed, right? And talking from that perspective. So is it worse or more harmful to look at it from the perspective of the person who is victimized, or from the perspective of the
From the
person who's
oppressor,
oppressing the person
right?
who's
Yeah.
victimized?
So the oppressor versus the oppressed.
Yeah, like obviously there's
Yeah.
there's physical harm attributed to the
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 oppressor.
to the right side, right?
Yeah.
But there's not from the left. What's the physical harm coming from the
Well,
identity politics on the left? What physical harm?
I would disagree with you that there's not physical harm from those on the left. There are, police officers shot and killed every day because they're just police officers, whether they're white or black. I
Wait.
think
Give me
that
one
there
case.
are
Give me
people.
one police officer that was killed because they're a police officer.
Oh, look, I can't. I don't mean. I can, look up and Google something about a, random shooting of a police officer. I mean, that would probably take too long. I can't give you a name of a police officer. There was a couple that just passed away in the city that I live in. So, I mean, I'm not going to, if anybody wants to Google that, they can definitely Google that. But I mean, it's happened, right? So I think me doing a Google search of, police officers being shot and killed at random would be a waste of our time. But I think that there's also, people who, have been attacked just because of their skin color. And it's not a oppressive white individual attacking, a group of, African
What
Americans
I'm
or
saying is that the identity politics played from the right, leads to that violence. The identity politics played on the left isn't leading to that. So I can again mention many examples of people literally being killed on the basis of them being black. We can talk about George Floyd, Andre
yeah.
Hill, Trayvon Martin, Sonia Massey. There are many examples we can point to of people being targeted on the basis of them being black. That's not a crime, right? In this country, we absolutely have an issue. These types of issues don't exist in countries around the world. It's an issue with police in America. It absolutely is, right? It is not saying every single police officer is a bad individual person. What it's saying is the system that has been created, right, specifically leads to desperate outcomes that negatively impact people who are black in this country, right?
What do you
Based
mean
upon
by
how
desperate
police operate.
outcome?
Like disparate outcomes. I'm saying that people who are black are disproportionately impacted by police brutality in this country. They're disproportionately impacted by medical racism. They're disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system, right? They are arrested falsely, right? They are people bring up the stats all the time, 1350, right? They say that all the fucking time, but what they don't, the 1350 they don't talk about is the fact that black people in this country make up 61% of exonerations. So, yes, people who are black are more likely to be put in these positions, but they are more likely to be falsely put there. So that's never what's talked about. They always want to portray it in such a way in which says that people who are black are somehow doing something that's wrong, or it's them, it's their fault, right? That's what they say.